A very good morning to you, and I suppose you've been there for a little bit now ahead of these polls. And how are ordinary Zimbabweans feeling about this morning?
Well, Yuveka, there's so much anticipation about what this day could potentially bring. It is a historic day, there's no question about that. Emmerson Mnangagwa goes to vote for the first time as president of Zimbabwe. Nelson Chamisa goes to vote for the first time as opposition MDC presidential candidate. And interestingly, Robert Mugabe goes to vote for the first time as former president of Zimbabwe. So it's all very different from what Zimbabweans are used to, but also because of the build-up itself, Yuveka, many people talking about the fact that the build-up has been, in a breakaway from what has become tradition, and a sad tradition at that, of violence preceding elections in Zimbabwe. Well, in this particular case, we are told that there were a few incidents, there were a few cases that police responded to in the build-up. But honestly, it's not been characterized by political violence, which had become a feature of the Zimbabwean political landscape. It's also the first election since 2000, thereabout, where international observers, including from countries that Zimbabwe has not seen eye to eye with in Europe, have been allowed to come and observe the election in Zimbabwe, and so there's so much anticipation. And the interesting thing, of course, is that for the first time now you have the two major political parties talking exactly the same language, that this election is about change, including the party that is in power, that is ZANU-PF of Emmerson Mnangagwa, is promising change and saying that Emmerson Mnangagwa is the person to lead Zimbabwe into real change in Zimbabwe, and that he's going to take a direction that signals a breakaway from the past, a past that they've dominated for the past 38 years. And of course, the movement for democratic change, saying that real change that delivers. And you have, an unprecedented 22 presidential candidates. We are told that one of them has actually pulled out, so the number was 23 and now it's 22. So really a historic day. Polls opening in just under an hour, and people are already starting to make their way to polling stations at this hour.
Well, of course, lots of questions still about whether these elections will be free and fair to us. Lots of controversy we saw last week over that ballot paper. Have those issues been ironed out, or do people go to the polls with that still top of mind, with that still being an issue?
So, Yuveka, that feature of the lack of political violence, which many people had sort of come to associate with elections in Zimbabwe, is a really big thing. It's a big deal. There's no downplaying that. But there's also no downplaying the kind of questions that the opposition in particular asks of the Zimbabwe electoral system and the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. The questions really are so, they signal the lack of trust in the system, to the point that people are even debating which pens will be used to mark ballot papers. How many ballot papers have been printed? Where? Who printed them? So even the question of pens and the ink, the indelible ink, because once a voter has voted, they will have their left small finger, a pricky, marked with indelible ink. Questions are being asked. How sure are we that this ink is indelible? What pen is being used? How sure are we that this pen will not, once you fold the ballot paper, transfer your vote from the person that you marked to the person that, will happen to correspond with where your mark is, and that person will then be the beneficiary of your vote? Because you'll remember that was the allegation in the previous election in 2013, ballot papers, and there was this question of what was called by locals the Nikuv project, Nikuv, an Israeli company that was alleged to have been at the center of vote rigging in 2013. People asking questions about the composition of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, the MDC not mincing their words about how they don't trust the ZEC. In contrast, then ZANU-PF, of course, saying that, well, you know, Nelson Chamisa, the leader of the MDC alliance, you were part of appointing some of these people that you are now casting aspersions on simply because you now see that they probably won't do your bidding. So the question of trusting the system, really, that's what it's about.